Are you someone who's interested in virtual reality and wondering what's going to happen with the future of AR? Well, stay put because our next panel is VR and AR Beyond Gaming.
Hi everyone, and how you doing? Really excited to be bringing you our VR and AR Beyond Gaming panel. We've got a cracking bunch of guests to look forward to. I hope you're sitting down at lunchtime with a sandwich or a cup of tea, like myself. Looking forward to us having a chat for the next probably kind of 45 minutes to an hour, exploring some of the panelists' own career journeys in VR and XR and looking at what the future may hold around that as well. So really excited to bring on some of the panelists. Hi, Sam. How you doing?
Hi, Declan. How are you? Hi, everyone.
Yeah, not too bad. Absolute pleasure to have you on. Payal, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks a lot for having me on.
Oh, it's absolutely brilliant. Thank you for coming. And Robin, great. Brilliant to have you here.
Nice to be here.
And we complete the crew. Nathan, how you doing?
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for coming. So just to give you a bit of a background about the panelists we've got today, and then we'll kind of crack straight into it. We've got Robin McNicholas, who's the founder of Marshmallow Laser Feast, one of the world's leading experiential design studios, with work featured at the Tribeca Film Festival, Singapore Science Museum, and just countless other arts galleries and design spaces worldwide. How are you doing, Nathan? You okay? Sorry, how are you doing, Robin? Sorry.
I'm all right, thank you. I'm straight out of Tribeca, so I'm a little bit fragile. But I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome, great. Well, yeah, nice stiff cup of coffee or something, and we'll manage to get through it together. Thanks, Robin. Thanks for joining us. We've got Nathan Baseley, game director at the UK's leading VR game studio, nDreams. Who are responsible for such action-packed titles as Phantom Covert Ops, Far Cry VR, and the upcoming Ghostbusters VR, which I am super excited about. So I'm sure you can't give us too many details on that, but it's just really lovely to have you here. How are you doing?
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thank you. Yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
Fantastic. Thanks for being here. And then we have Dr. Payal Ghatnekar, who is the Immersive Technology Research Lead at Torbay and South Devon NHS Foundation Trust, working on how immersive technologies can reduce patient pain and anxiety, improve patient experience and encourage behavior change, while also looking at how VR training can improve education for health workers. So like a lot of stuff that you're working on, right?
So a variety of different things. So we work on improving healthcare workers' education and training so that they are better able to deal with patients and provide a better experience. And then we also focus on pain and anxiety distraction for patients.
Amazing. Thank you. Thanks so much for being here. Can't wait to talk to you about that.
Thanks for having me.
And finally, last but not least, Mr. Sam Watts from Make Real, the Immersive Partnerships Director there. Make Real is a VR and AR studio that work on learning simulations, games, and all manner of immersive projects for huge global companies like EDF, Lloyds Bank, NHS, Vodafone, Google, Porsche, and you've developed games for titles from PC VR, PlayStation VR, and the Quest. You guys are pretty much in there, Sam, right? I mean, what don't you do when it comes to VR?
Well, we'll find out when you ask my question about brands, but we don't do marketing, that's for sure.
Oh, absolute pleasure to have you here, though, man. Really glad you could make it.
So
we're going to kick off just with an open question to everyone, really, and you can each answer it as you know, whoever wants to jump in first. But I'm really quite keen to hear a little bit about all of your journeys into kind of AR and VR. And I know that a lot of the people that we ask this question to, pretty much everyone has a wiggly career. It wasn't something that you just suddenly decided to do when you came out of university or at some point in the past, especially because it's such a new area. But a lot of people that might be watching this might be just starting their games careers, might just be a little twinkle in the back of their mind that potentially they could go into that area. So I think it's really interesting to hear about your own journeys and how you got there. So if anyone wants to jump in first, or I'll pick on someone, what do you think? Who wants to crack on with that one? Sam, should we start with you?
I was going to say, feel free to pick on us. So back when I were a lad in the 90s, there was a place in London called Trocadero Centre, and they had some very ancient VR devices called the Virtuality, and it was this huge system. It was really heavy. The graphics were really rubbish. It didn't look like anything we have today. You paid about £5 for a 3-minute experience, and mostly what you got was a headache. But it showed me at the time, this is the next paradigm of computing. This is really cool. So you can go into the system. Unfortunately, VR kind of faded away for a long time. So I didn't forget about it, but I looked into other areas. And I ended up going through the process and working for a training company in Brighton called Epic, not to be confused with Epic, who make the 3D engine, as a tester. And then it's a great, foot in the door type job. You need attention to skills and critical thinking and analysis skills and being able to report things properly. But at the same time, it gave me a really good taster of all the different departments of creating something digital. When a Korean company set up in Brighton called NCSoft, there was an opening for somebody to do the QA for a game titled Guild Wars. And I jumped at the opportunity, wanting to get away from sort of click next screen-based training testing. And I was fortunate enough to pass the interview, and spent 4 years there overseeing the release of Guild Wars across all of the European countries, basically. And yeah, the wiggly bits was just QA and attention to detail leading into production and project management, which then eventually saw me coming back to what is now Make Real, after having overseen testing and localization for Zynga, but working in London on San Francisco hours, which wasn't fun, to launch a multi-channel projected construction site training simulator that mixed massive screens and 3D content and live actors. Not quite as exciting as what Robin does, but in a very sort of training orientated way. And it was at that time that the Oculus Rift DK1 DevKit 1 came out, and we got one. And I was just lucky enough to convince the boss at the time to give me a year or so to go and play and explore, to understand what we could do with this new low-cost VR headset that worked with Unity and relatively low-end, low-powered computers at the time. And the rest, as they say, is history.
I wonder how many UK games developers could also add Trocadero to their list of things that inspired them. I imagine quite a few.
Probably quite a few you could also add started in QA, I imagine, as well.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sam. That's great. Payal?
I unmuted myself. So my journey has been quite wriggly. It's all over the place. I started off trying to get into pre-med. So I did pre-med, and then I moved on to marketing, and then I got into user experience research and usability research. And from there, I ended up with the PhD in persuasive technology, which was with the business school. And from there, I saw a position open at the medical school, where they were looking for somebody with eye tracking research expertise, which I already had during my PhD. And I really enjoyed that. And I have always been fond of technology, but I wasn't a proper developer in any sense. I have learned programming languages. I was always interested in graphic designing. I've done a bit of that growing up, but this position came up, and it was the first VR lab within the NHS, which was at the Torbay Hospital. And they were still using the cardboard headsets. And when I put my CV in, I didn't think that they would take me seriously because of all my crazy experiences all over the place. I even worked in events management at one point. So when I got the job, I was just pretty shocked. And that's when I learned that you have to be able to transfer your skills. And they are pretty much transferable all across the sector. It really doesn't matter. So it shouldn't stop somebody from pursuing a career in VR. And that's how I ended up working in VR for the past 7 years, and in healthcare. So I kind of started wanting to work in healthcare, and I ended up becoming like a not so useful doctor. But I am living the dream that I kind of had growing up. So it's really nice to be around technology and do all these cool things and be a part of something that's actually helping patients, helping change our society and empowering patients, which is what I'm really interested in. So that's been, yeah, my strange journey.
That's fantastic. And I'm interested, are there any other kind of immersive NHS kind of VR centres across the country now, or any more?
Of course, yeah. So our lab opened up in 2016, but since then we have helped establish quite a few VR labs within our locality, but now they're just everywhere. All of the NHS hospitals have access to VR headsets, and they are all trying to pursue their own things because it's really dependent on the hospital what kind of challenges they want to tackle, and that can be quite unique to different regions. But now you don't have, we're not at a stage where we have to convince clinicians to use headsets. I think they already understand the value of headsets. What we are now trying to do is how can we co-create with patients? How can we improve that experience for them? Because they are the end users. And I think that kind of shows that we are sort of advancing on this journey. So yeah, it's everywhere in healthcare.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. Really excited to talk to you about it a little bit more later on. Thank you for that. Nathan.
Yeah, hi everyone. So my career started in a very different industry. I was involved in product design and manufacturing, things like vacuum cleaners and stuff like that. And I did that for 10 years. And then I suppose my role was kind of project manager. And so I then moved into games, and my first role was PlayStation. And I joined their iToy team. So that was the team that had done all of the camera-based games on PS2. And they were making their transition from PS2 to PS3. And that was a philosophical change for them. It was changing from taking the player and putting them into the game to bringing the game out into the world. There was one other console AR game before us, so we were in really uncharted territory. And they were using AR visually, whereas we were trying to interact with it. We made a pet game called iPet, and so we had to sort of pioneer like how to interact with the pet and how to interact with objects in AR. This was all really new. And I sort of wish I'd known how new it was to everyone, because I thought this is really hard because I haven't worked in games before. And I later realized it was hard for everyone because it was so pioneering. So we made 5 iPets in the end, or I worked on 5 iPets, including 2 that were on portable console, which was then a whole load of other challenges. I worked on Diggs Nightcrawler, which was an AR storybook game, on SingStar, where we had some AR masks. And then I got into VR, went to Supermassive and worked on a game called Bravo Team. This was a co-op military shooter. And we started around the time that the first wave of PSVR games were coming out. And so in a lot of ways, our decisions were responses to that kind of stuff, good and bad. And then it kind of brings me up to date. I sort of went around a couple of other studios doing some mobile games, and then I came to nDreams. First game here was a location-based VR game, Far Cry, which is fantastic. And that was multiplayer of 8 players. And now I'm working on just sort of getting towards the end really of Ghostbusters VR, which is for Quest and PSVR 2. So pretty much all of my games have been AR or VR, which is kind of probably quite useful for this discussion. But kind of accidental, really, getting into it and also persisting with it. I just like the way I feel about it is I've gotten quite used to working with novel mechanics and novel points of interaction, and it's been less specifically about XR. It's more like I've followed that path, which happens to be XR. So that's it, up to date.
Great. And it'd definitely be interesting to talk about the kind of differences between AR and VR when it comes to user experience specifically, the challenges, I guess, between those. So it'd be good to explore that later on too. So thank you, Nathan. Thanks a lot. And finally, Robin.
Oh, thanks. It's firstly really nice to hear about these zigzagging paths. I feel in good company, and mine was, as you suggested, Declan, zigzagging as well. I studied film and television, but it was at the time of the Bondi Blue iMac, to give you an idea of how old I am. And the internet emerged at the same time, and I was really interested in aspects of non-linear storytelling, basically. And given this CD-ROM, which is obviously quite a cheesy part of my drive is to bring integrity to the word multimedia, but I think it's always been quite dorky, as you know, VR headsets that a mate of mine describes as the Segway for the face. But I'm really passionate about the medium, and I think even back then, seeing all the real-time interactive stuff that was coming out from people like PressTube, people like PlayStation, the Designers Republic, and definitely High Res, who made the Requiem for a Dream website. I just got really inspired by fresh snow and new opportunities to tell stories. I love the complexity and the kind of creative challenge of developing narrative works that weren't linear. And that took me straight out of uni. I went to the BBC, worked on a live music show. Then the people that I was living with, we were doing lots of VJing, lots of projection, and you know, I worked with loads of electronic acts like Aphex Twin and Square Pusher and Chris Clark and the whole kind of Warp roster. I got entrenched with that, and it really made me interested in real-time dynamic stuff, but also bringing creative coders into the performance context and trying to prize people out of the gaming world into this new performative world. And I met people along the way like Alex Evans, who set up Media Molecule, of course, who then went on to make Little Big Planet, and he's now doing amazing things at NVIDIA. But I think that where we got to from VJing was projection mapping, and projection mapping got really bored of just baking one thing and pressing play. So real-time projection mapping occurred. And because we were using tools like Unity and Unreal Engine, when the DK1 dropped, really, you know, it was quite an easy transition. And we were like, right, you know, we can invite audience to step into the screen. And that's what's taken MLF to where we have today. That's where I met Barney on that kind of 1.0 circuit. We founded the company together with a guy called Memo Acton. And yeah, now it's just still really inspiring, and the fresh snow, effectively this opportunity for creative storytelling and with virtual production. The kind of developments with NFTs and the Web3 scene, and just frankly the prospect of persistent story worlds where you can have virtual storytelling with a physical manifestation, where you've got all the controlled conditions to really immerse people, bring scent and all the kind of theatrical effects in, and that's our passion.
That's fantastic. And do you think that the barriers to entry now on a lot of these technologies have been reduced to a point where you can kind of call it, well, I don't know if you want to call it kind of another creative revolution, but do you feel like there's a kind of a shift happening at the moment when it comes to kind of the new wave of creative technologists and utilizing that in kind of more artistic ways previously than maybe have been before, which was maybe kind of a high technology realm? Do you feel a kind of shift happening there?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if everyone agrees, but you know, all you need look at is, you know, things like the virtual beings festivals emerging that are showcasing fashion and other areas outside of gaming, but using tools like Unreal Engine and Unity.
Yeah, fantastic. So, I mean, you know, we see a lot of people watching this are going to be, as I say, maybe taking their first steps into the VR and AR. And this panel is all about the kind of vastly different areas that you can maybe start looking into. And you know, we were obviously really privileged to have all you guys on the panel today to talk a little bit more in depth about the specific areas that you guys work in. And I'd love to start, Payal, with yourself, because I think the area that you're working in is probably an area that a lot of people are watching this wouldn't have even considered for a second. So they wouldn't even thought about kind of VR and AR when it comes to healthcare, probably for obvious reasons. But we thought it'd be fantastic if you wanted to talk a little bit about your work especially around kind of pain and anxiety management, I think is really interesting, and probably will strike a chord with, once again, a lot of people that are watching. So it'd be great to have a little bit of understanding about that, and just more widely when it comes to health sector, what it kind of looks like and where it might go.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I have been working in this field for the past 7 years, and I have seen it grown so rapidly. Like, I didn't anticipate the growth the way it has moved along. And I know people outside the NHS tend to get shocked when I speak with people outside. Like, they have no idea that NHS has been investing in VR headsets and augmented reality headsets. Like, we have access to about 13 HoloLens headsets recently, and a lot of different hospitals are part of this national initiative where everyone has access to these headsets. So the interest is growing, and people are trying to solve problems that currently have, I mean, since COVID, the uptake has just gone up because COVID sort of pushed NHS to undergo rapid transformation in terms of innovation, and people started understanding the value of these technologies. So what we have worked on for the past 7 years is we only focus on non-technical skills education and training or patient experiences. So we don't do any technical things like surgical skills education and training. A lot of different hospitals do that, but that is not our specialty. We tend to focus more on empathy skills and effective communication, having the first person perspective, which is what VR kind of offered in the beginning. And because our team was small, we started focusing on 360 videos. That's how it started, and that's where I'll get into why we need to focus more on developing better worlds with Unity and Unreal. Because when we started, we focused on things that were already available in the App Store. 360 films were easily accessible, and you didn't need something expensive or big to solve the problems of anxiety and pain. You just need to provide some kind of a tool for people to get distracted while they are maybe having some needles poked into them, because a lot of people, especially adolescents, tend to suffer from needle phobias. And that's when we started working with the podiatry team. So toenail removal surgery, as gross as it sounds, it tends to have a lot of adolescents who experience needle phobia, and then they cancel appointments or they don't want to come for their next appointment. There's a lot of money that's lost because of the appointments being canceled. And what they found out was if they provide them some kind of a nature experience, like a 360 VR experience, and while they're undergoing this procedures, they tend to get distracted, and they don't experience the fear that they would usually experience if they were staring at their toe being poked with a needle. And there's so much data to back this up, because if you have a look at healthcare VR interventions that are looking into how they can be used for pain and anxiety distraction, there's tons of information out there about how it has an effect on the user's presence. And it works along the same kind of mechanism as one would experience if they were taking pain medication. So your similar kind of neurotransmitters are activated that will distract you from pain. And there's tons of research on fMRI as well. They have done fMRI scans to show that these parts of the brain that help you deal with pain are activated when you are in VR. So there is definitely some link there, although we don't have enough data. I think we are still at a stage where people need to conduct more studies and have more data around that. But we have found it quite successful, and the hospital has managed to save a lot of money as well. I think they saved around £5,000 that would have otherwise gone towards general anesthetic, because sometimes people can panic and then they require general anesthetics as well. So the podiatry team is very happy with these headsets. And what we have noticed since then is a lot of different pathways. They keep contacting our lab because they want access to these headsets. Now, the thing is, because we have had access to these cheap experiences, 360, I know there's a debate between whether 360 is VR or not, because it's not really VR, because you're not interacting with the experiences. But now, over the years, like in the past 2 years at least, I've seen a lot of growing interest in creating interactive worlds. So I've been speaking with a lot of different clinicians within the NHS where they are trying to develop some games, because you need to look at the interactivity aspect as well. So one of the things that is not studied clearly within healthcare VR is how people get immersed and how their presence transforms from one reality to virtual reality. Like, how are they shifting. And that is where I think this interactivity and better games development using Unity and Unreal Engine comes in. Because recently we've hired somebody who has these skills, and a lot of different hospitals have also been in touch with us, and they are quite interested in developing these programs because they want more interactivity that is currently not offered through 360. So that is where we are at present, and I think that's where healthcare is headed. So if you look at different companies that are popping up in this field, a lot of them are focused on more interactive, immersive experiences, because if you improve the immersivity and if you provide a high quality experience, you will be able to potentially help patients deal with chronic pain as well, and not just one-off fear of needles. Because there's so many different things, like fibromyalgia, for example. There's a lot of work going on within the NHS. I recently spoke with a clinician who's working on this, and he's creating some games that are based on interactivity to help people manage that chronic pain. We have also been working with, the physio team has been working with some patients who have knee problems, and that is again a chronic problem. So we're trying to incorporate different distractions to help patients deal with them. But potentially, I see a lot of interest and growth in the field of creating something new and not just relying on what's available in the App Store.
Absolutely. And in terms of creating that new work, I mean, you mentioned that you've recently hired someone to support your team in developing that. Has there been any work where you've seen some of the foundations work with maybe a local university or a college, or or groups of young people or people looking to enter the sector to then help work with your team of clinicians to develop something that way? Does it work that way as well?
Yeah, there are so many opportunities. So we have been working for the past year alongside Plymouth University's master students. They had some master students who wanted, it's a, I think, project-based degree where they have to complete a project for 1 year. And they have been working with the hospital. I think this was still 360 VR, what they're working on. It's based in ICU, and they also created some applications for adolescents, like a VR application to get them used to the hospitals before they come into the hospital, because there tends to be a lot of anxiety and fear in terms of their appointments. A lot of children can experience that fear, not knowing what to expect. So they have been working on that. But we have also been working with the South Devon College here in Devon, and that is again an opportunity, because I think younger students have such a better hold of what's happening in terms of technology. They have more fresh ideas, and I think we definitely need that. So my role as a researcher is constantly trying to look at how we can form collaborations with different academic institutes. And that means we need to have connections with different students, even if it's PhD students, for example. That PhD could be, they could have their PhD around creating some kind of a program that's useful for healthcare. So there's tons of opportunities. I mean, I come across so many things all the time on LinkedIn, and I'm always impressed that in the past few years, it's changed so much. There's just so much interest and opportunities for collaboration.
Yeah, and I know, Sam, Make Real's worked on some things for the NHS, haven't you? You've worked on some kind of training programs and packages as well.
Yeah, so, well, quick fun fact, our very early game demo back in 2014 for a high-speed sci-fi racing game, a bit like F-Zero, was actually used in one of the first pain reduction studies of using VR. And they found that immersing someone's hand in an icy bucket of water for a long time, when immersed in VR, they could keep their hand in for longer.
Yeah.
But the main outcome was the fact that when it was actually the audio of the game playing as well, that then allowed them to be more immersed and actually withstand the pain of the ice for even much longer. But we've been working with NHS Blood and Transplant in Bristol, and it's completely different aspects really to it, in terms of we're looking at waste reduction and improving sustainability. So obviously blood is a very crucial asset that is used for blood transfusions and is needed to save lives. So for every drop of blood that is essentially used to train people how to do the blood transfusions and the blood identification is blood that's wasted, that could have been used to help save a life. So we've been working with NHSBT to explore how to use VR to train people up to a base level of how to carry out these procedures and be assessed in carrying out these procedures without actually using real world materials. So it's reducing waste, making sure what is there is being used for the right purpose. and effectively still, allowing people to be skilled and trained effectively. But I think to go back to Payal's other point as well is that it's people are growing up with always available internet and touchscreens and smartphones, etc. From a recruitment point of view, companies need to be incorporating far more interesting training to appeal to people that they are modern, future thinking, and not just you're not just going to be sat there through 20-minute boring videos or click next screen-based training stuff.
And I mean, you guys have a lot of experience of working with kind of quite big brands, and some small and medium brands as well. And it feels like the way it's going, these large big brands have been the first to maybe get on board with kind of actually the practical rollout of VR and AR in terms of training simulations or brand engagement or whatever else it is. But that feels like that's kind of, once again, the barrier to that is dropping down. So probably more and more companies are going to be deciding to use those tools or want to use those tools in some way, which feels like a big opportunity for, once again, a lot of the people who might be watching. What's it like working with a brand when you're delivering an AR or VR product? What do you need to kind of take into consideration to make sure they have a good experience and you get the information that you need as an organization to actually deliver what they want?
I mean, for us, from a training perspective, it's still a lot of baby steps, and there's still a lot of hand holding and a lot of educating and evangelizing, working through what actually is the problem they're trying to solve, rather than leading something with the technology. We have quite a few organizations who come to us and they're like, we want VR, and they're like, why? And like, well, I don't know, our competitors are using it, or it helps me tick an innovation box, etc. So we'll sit down with them and actually get to the crux of what it is that their problem is. Where is a gap in the training? Where is the training failing? What are the processes that aren't working? Where does a particular, what actually is a problem? And then the technology, whether it's AR, VR, mobile, falls out of that solution rather than leading it. But there's a lot of validation that still needs to be done. People aren't they're much more aware of VR and AR. There's still a lot of confusion around what it actually means, especially with AR. It can be applied to anything from immersive weather reports to smart glasses to full-on actual location-based aware content. And typically in the mass media, especially in the gaming press, whenever VR is mentioned, nausea is always mentioned in the same sentence. So we've been doing it for nearly 10 years, and the number of events we've done and thousands of people we've put through VR, we learned very quickly that just do away with the list of warnings that this experience might make you feel funny, or etc. I learned about the nocebo effect rather than the placebo effect, and it's planting this negative thought that, oh, it's VR, it might make me feel sick. Then they actually end up making themselves feel sick because of that. So we just say people, if any time you want to, just take the headset off. And we've seen the numbers of people feeling funny being greatly reduced. But there's a whole, in terms of barriers to entry, we've talked a lot about Unity and Unreal's been mentioned. They all have free versions. The SDKs and the plugins are all free. I saw a question in the chat already about how can you develop for VR without a headset, which is difficult because you need to test. It's such a positional, physical thing. You do need access to a device, really. But for example, in Brighton, we have the Fuse Box. They have a whole immersive lab where you can go in and use these tools and technologies. Places like Coder Dojo, have devices and skills workshops on Saturdays for that kind of thing. And VR can be, a lot of it is around design in terms of comfort. The technology itself has got to a level where a lot of the nausea will generally go away, but some people will always feel ill. But AR is where it is really at the moment in terms of what brands want to engage with. If they're not sure, they don't know why. But then earlier you said about brands, and for us, brands equals marketing, which isn't something we do. But there's a lot of tools out there like Snap Lens Studio and Spark AR, and the new Niantic Lightship that's just been launched from the people who made Pokemon Go. A lot of these tools do all the heavy lifting for you, and very close to being no code. So as long as you can create a 3D asset, there's a lot of ways you can play around with the mobile AR. But this mobile AR is all just learnings at the moment to what eventually will become headset AR when they become smaller and more affordable. Payal says they've got a load of HoloLens 2s, but those are $3,000 each. They aren't going to be a consumer device anytime soon.
What are your thoughts on kind of web VR, Sam, and how that might?
It's getting there. I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, if we want to get towards, well, I'll be the first one in the panel to mention the metaverse, I guess. But in order to get that next level of the internet with the openness and the interoperability, it's all going to have to be delivered through the web. And metaverse is essentially the next stage of the internet, and that's all it is. WebXR is growing by day in terms of strength, in terms of standards, in terms of capabilities. Same with the browsers. And these days, you can have some fantastic experiences in the browser, in the headset, without having to install an app. You just run it off a website. So those days of the days of store walled gardens will probably always be there, but the opportunities for that openness and interoperability between devices is certainly getting stronger and stronger.
Fantastic. And I guess throughout this whole process, everybody's kind of co-developing the user experience in 3D. So the same user experience we've had within a web browser for the last 20, 30 years. It seems like there's a new experience that's coming, or that's being developed. Certainly, Apple, their kind of new OS and things like that are all in the pipeline. But interestingly, I suppose, Nathan, you've been working in kind of what this user experience for 3D space could look like for a long time now. And I imagine a lot of the learnings that are going to move into that kind of more utility-based kind of VR experience of just interacting with these kind of new worlds will be coming from games. What when it comes to kind of developing VR and AR titles, how is it different from developing kind of traditional games? What do you have to think about? What are the different kind of workflows around that?
I mean, most of the games I've developed have been in this space, so I can't directly contrast with my own experience. But one of the first things that we will do if we're making a VR game, and probably the same with AR, is think about how much of that VR interaction we're going to want. For example, you could keep a menu interactable in a traditional way, because we've got sticks and we've got buttons, and so we could have that menu work exactly the same as it works in a non-VR game. Or a door, you press a button to open a door, but we're in VR, so we don't want to do that. We want to reach out and grab the door and open it, and we don't want a menu. We want to turn that into a physical thing. Maybe we want to change a costume on a character, so rather than select it from a menu, let's have a wardrobe, and I can grab the coat hanger and I can put the costume on. And so that's great, but that's not necessarily the right choice for every game. So nDreams made a title called Fract, which was very much inspired by 80s action movies. And rather than go into detail with I've got to get the magazine out of a drawer and I've got to put the magazine into the bottom of the gun and load it that way, they wanted it faster. So they kept the bit of that VR interaction that felt great, which was the slamming the magazine into the bottom, and the rest of it they automated. And so I think when you're making a traditional game, you can kind of get on with the content. If I was making a first-person shooter, for whatever, Xbox or something, I would say, right, what's this about? Where are we set? What's the game about? And there might be a small number of novel interactions, but with VR and AR, you tend to start with how is this a VR game? And I think player expectations as well are still changing in this space. So again, if we were making a standard standard. If we're making a first-person shooter, traditional first-person shooter, the player has expectations about which button is going to be the fire button and which one's going to be the aim button, and you sort of don't mess with that now. And we were talking, you just touched, Sam, on comfort. And, this is an area that's been changing as well. When we were making Bravo Team 5 years ago, we were sort of terrified of this area because the new games, the first game wave had just come out, and there were shows where people were reporting nausea. And so we had this sort of fear around free movement. And then here we are a few years later, and we understand some players actually want that freedom. And then there's other players that want an alternative movement set or alternative to that, but that's not fixed. So I think the main difference is when you're working with novel technology is to know how much you're going to of that novelty you're going to take, or that uniqueness of the interaction you're going to take, how much you're going to and how that relates to your overall goals of how you want the game to feel. And over time, the more we do this, the more that will become standardized, and the less that will be a question. So there we go.
So you do feel that there is a standardization happening across different titles and different that's been happening.
It's happening, but we're a long way from it having happened. I've just think of 2 conversations I've had this morning on exactly this subject of like, how are we going to do this? And there's one person saying, well, that's the way that these games are doing it. And it's like, yeah, but those are flat games. How do we do it in VR? Well, it's mixed. So what's the best way to do it? What is the feedback that we've had from our, from where we're at now, from our user tests? What's working and what isn't working? And of course we play loads of VR games. And so we talk about, in that game, that was brilliant. That's what we need, And so the longer it goes on, the more you borrow, and then there's a sort of effect across the industry, which then in turn affects players' expectations. And if they have expectations for how something should work, and you go against it, that it doesn't say you can't go against it, but if you do go against it, then that's going to be a step for the player to take as well. So yeah, definitely change, massive changes in 5 years around what we should do. And the biggest one I can think of is the movement one, because it was, we were terrified of it a few years ago. And now it's like, yeah, people want free movement, but some people want an alternative. So, and then it becomes an accessibility question.
Absolutely. And I think interesting, Robin, I mean, you're in your world, which is kind of bordering on the physical as well, so you're kind of with these, it's not just you in the VR space and you have to just worry about the room or the close quarters, that there's a much bigger space potentially that people have to navigate. And how have you found developing the user experience within that kind of world as well, and kind of bridging the virtual and the physical together? What has there been any challenges along that journey?
There are loads of challenges and an incredible amount of obstacles. I'll give you a few examples. Well, for starters, throughput is a real issue. Even in the space of 2 years, we've had technological advancements that have really helped us. So where we're showing a thing at the moment in Singapore, the Art Science Museum. It's called We Live in an Ocean of Air, and you have to wear a backpack PC, 5 trackers on your wrists, and that alone requires audiences to be introduced to what these things are, and it takes time. And so the throughput of that, it becomes a bottleneck, basically, even though actually I'm a fan of the backpacks, because in some ways the weight of them is quite grounding. It slows the audience down as well a wee bit. But streaming to headsets, which is what we've been doing in our most recent project, Evolver, has meant that the throughput has improved a great deal. But there's trade-offs. So with the power of a PC on your back, we've included things like a heart rate monitor and a breath sensor, and we can do all of that processing on the backpack. Whereas if we're streaming to a Quest 2, which is what we're doing with Evolver, we can't have any of the lovely immersive appendages like these breath sensors and heart rate monitors. So there's these compromises going on, as well as you know, as the scene crystallizes still, it just gives us faith that we know it's on such a compelling track as the visuals become more high fidelity, as all the silicon's going up into the sky and all the rendering is taking place up there instead of on backpacks. That's extraordinary. So that's just a snapshot of some of the aspects of what we're faced with. But in terms of your question about mixed reality, we do loads of research, R&D into deformable object tracking and bringing props in. So things like pool noodles with Vicon trackers on the end, and all of a sudden they become a theremin. And what can you do with that? You can puppeteer a giraffe, or, you know, there's many creative applications for it. Or rubber rings that are squidgy. You know, that there's a big internal conversation about why is everything we interact with either made of aluminium or glass, you know, iPads and trackpads and what have you. And so chuck someone a rubber ring, we're dialing into that familiarity, you know, the physical interfaces that you've learned as a child on a beach, as opposed to having to say, no, this is a Vive, it's not the Oculus, it's a different handset. All of that, if you swap those physical interfaces out and bring them into familiar prop territory, essentially cherry pick from the theatre world, then that really interests us, because it brings in tactility to the conversation. I don't for a minute want to poo-poo the amazing stuff that is creating so much familiarity with controllers. They're in fact beautiful design objects, and personally I love all the haptics and so on. But for our experiential work and the opportunity to tell stories, you know, through the sense of touch, kind of getting, much like how I was getting bored with pressing play on projection mapping and converting to real-time projection mapping, we're now at a stage where it's like, there's lots of hand wafting. Let's bring some tactility in there so you can actually feel some of the virtual worlds and enhance that suspension of disbelief.
How, and you mentioned a few different sensors there. Probably for everyone really, because I think it's relevant for probably everybody here. Like, what do you feel is the kind of next step around that? Because I mean, I guess we're entering a time where we will be tracked on a level that we haven't been tracked before. So where your eyes are, what emotional state you're in, you know, levels of sweat, all kinds of different sensors that are going to be on there. Where do you see that going? And have you got any examples of kind of interesting uses of that, of those? And I imagine, Payal, as well, you'll probably be very interested in the level of sensors that are going to be available for around medicine specifically. So it'd be interesting just to get an idea about where you think that might be going in the future.
So one of the examples that I have come across is now with the Vario headset as well, the eye tracking already, you know, working so well with it. They have been using it to teach different surgical skills, such as spotting something that may be off in an environment, because ICU environments can be so chaotic and they have different protocols that they have to follow. So it has to be followed in an algorithmic sort of fashion, and spotting things that are a bit out of place. You could study something like that with eye tracking. There's also some use of EEG to track your brain waves, especially in pain management. That's quite useful. So I do see these technologies being incorporated. I think one of the problems with healthcare is that it can be a bit not so adventurous. Because they're working with patients, there are a lot of protocols in place. For example, Sam just mentioned the thing about nausea, and you just don't tell people that there is, that they may experience nausea. But with healthcare, with all your ethical protocols and everything in place, you have to tell the patients that they may experience these things, and that is like sort of putting an idea in their head already, because we do experience that. There are some people who put on the headset and they'll just start acting funny. That happens because of some preconceived notions. But I see that there is technology and it can be used. There can be great use, and it does come from the US. There's lots that's happening in the US because their ethics protocol is quite different as opposed to what we do in the NHS. NHS works quite safely and wants to protect patients. I think it's a lot stricter within the UK to try interesting things. So I do see a future, but I don't know how quickly we will get there. I feel like it's going to be a bit of a journey with the NHS.
Great. Robin, what, in terms of incorporating that into your work, into the sensors and how that's going, do you think that do you see that increasing as you go forward?
Yes, absolutely. If you just, for instance, check out the Move.ai guys, the democratization of motion capture is really helping creative entities to explore what is predominantly a really expensive space. You know, Vicon rigs cost a bomb, but they Move.ai guys, to give them a quick plug, they are doing things with GoPros and massively reducing the cost. And of course, you know, again with the R&D that's taking place internally, things like the skeletal tracker on the iPad and on the iPhone provides new opportunities to get busy with the virtual production. But markerless mocap, if you remember what I mentioned about this putting a backpack on, the bottleneck of kitting people up. Well, in a markerless mocap environment, of course, you can just have people rock up to a volume and they're immediately tracked. And I think that is hugely exciting for location-based experiences. And with regards to the other sensory tech like breath sensors, heart rate monitors, EEG, and so on, what's amazing is there are extraordinary courses out there. You know, if you look at the Bartlett School of Architecture is really close to where our studio is in East London, Hackney Wick, and they have a course called Design for Performance Interaction, where that is just outputting all these extraordinary individuals loaded with all kinds of mechatronics talent, ability to use Arduino and so on. So there's new collaborative opportunities out there as well. You don't have to necessarily learn online how to create a breath sensor yourself. There are people out there that you can connect with, to collaborate with, and you know, we're all about that. We prefer the collaborative process. It's the spice of life.
Fantastic. Nathan, are you going to be doing anything coming up with sensors? I imagine there's some things probably you can't talk about, actually.
Possibly. I mean, when I was at PlayStation, there was some work that we did in this space. I think it's an interesting thing with games because, like, the vanguard for some of this stuff can be kind of the more the broader titles, yeah, like the party games and the stuff that Nintendo did with the Wii and that sort of thing. And sometimes it can be hard to sort of shift a kind of core audience onto something like this. If it was incorporated into headsets, yes, it's already there and it's already available. Then yeah, there's loads of applications that you can think of. It would sort of be additive to what you've already got. I mean, one of the things that I think is a really fascinating area generally is like the merging of AI and VR, right? So like virtual characters, and we was talking earlier about like eye tracking or gaze tracking, and how in real life, if you look at the top of somebody's head, like they will, you know, you look up, like, what's wrong with my hair? You know, we can do that already with this gaze tracking tech that we have, and like so we're getting along the path of non-verbal communication with AI characters. We've got AI which is improving all of the time. If we were able to check heart rate, for instance, I mean, we're getting into some really interesting territory, aren't we? Where, you know, virtual friends and, you know, virtual teachers and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's fascinating area. often the barrier will be if you want to incorporate it into a headset. Well, what are all the functions? Are we going to be able to use it in every single game? And sometimes that can be the that can be a bit of a barrier. But from a game design point of view, these things are fascinating. Yeah, give me everything you can, and then we'll you know what I mean. We'll take all of them.
Well, what do you for the people that are watching, what do you think are kind of the core, if you were to say, look, just learn these kind of tools right now and that will get you started, what are the kind of core design tools at the moment around kind of VR and AR? I guess I mean you mentioned move.ai, Robin. That feels like one of those kind of, I just quickly got it up on the on a little tab and it looks amazing. I can't wait to actually look at it a bit further afterwards. But are there other kind of early stage tools like that people can kind of just get stuck in and have a go? And what's the kind of core set of things that people should really start building their skills around to ensure they've got the skills they need, for the next kind of few years in terms of where the sector's going?
I'd say if you look at the MetaHuman, for example, there's some really exciting tools available if you were interested in virtual production. They've just released this mesh to MetaHuman, which means that you can scan your own head. There's an example on Twitter, the Twitter handle Smallfly, who's a mate out in Montreal, runs a company called DPT, and they're just tinkering, beavering away, and exposing. They're just looking at using the existing tools that are free and available to everybody. I would also say that if you were, I mean, it's obvious, but the Unity are equally as generous with sharing access to their tools.
Great. Anyone else at all in terms of specific tools?
I mean, I mentioned a couple of earlier, but the stuff that talking about cameras and sensors, the stuff that Snap is doing with lenses and spectacles, they can do that markerless full body tracking now. So learning how that works is certainly viable, and certainly a way of getting noticed through viral posts by brands online. And then the Spark AR is the Meta Facebook equivalent for Instagram. And Niantic, the makers of Pokemon Go, have just released this massively powerful tool set, Lightship, that's just going to really drive the future of AR and mixed sort of reality content.
Fantastic. Nathan, Unity or Unreal?
Yeah, I can't really add to Sam and Robin's answers much other than, get yourself Unreal, get yourself a headset, get on some YouTube tutorials. I mean, I think that, experiencing things that already exist and analyzing them and trying to figure out why did this feel good and why did this one bad. I mean, these aren't like, tools that you can buy, but these are skills that you can develop just by looking at what's already there. Because it's so early, you have got that richness of like, you've got things that that do things, in a particular way that make you feel something, and then you can analyze why is that, so that's I can't really add to the tools thing we've already heard though.
Brilliant.
In terms of needing a headset, my biggest advice is check Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah,
you can pick up secondhand devices so cheap locally. You don't have to buy full price. Just check the lenses aren't scratched, and you can get a good PC VR headset or a secondhand Quest 2 for like a third of the price.
And we've got about a minute left. So what we're really interested in is if each of you, is there a VR or AR experience that you think people have just got to try, or they should really give it a go? If in your area, maybe, or it doesn't need to be, just something that you think will really inspire somebody to maybe forward or develop their own experiences themselves, just so they've got a good understanding of what that might look like. If you can't think of anything, don't worry. But if you can, that'd be fantastic. Sam?
I guess I'm going first. I'll be the one, you've got to play Half-Life Alyx just because it's had the biggest budget and so much added to it. And then just throw away everything you've ever remembered about it, because you'll never be able to afford to implement it into a low budget title, especially training. Although we did get a nice water shader into the NHS blood transfusion experience.
Payal?
Right. So I would say Goliath VR. I don't know how many people have seen it, but it's an interactive experience. And the reason I mention it is because within healthcare, we want people to develop compassion and compassionate communication and understand empathy. And I feel like an experience like that, where you get to interact, but also experience someone else's life. But again, it's not like first person perspective in 360. I found that quite interesting. And I think something along those lines would just be brilliant in healthcare. So if anyone's, I don't know, not checked it out, it's worth checking out.
Awesome. Thank you. Robin?
I'd say Symbiosis by Polymorph. You can't really download it, but they tour it to different festivals. I hope it comes to England. They use soft robotics and all inflatables that manipulate and puppeteer the VR user, and they pipe oxytocin under your headset, and it's the embodiment and user journey is extraordinary. I'd recommend checking out Polymorph. They're a Dutch entity.
Awesome. That sounds great. And finally, Nathan, not an nDreams title.
Oh, I was just about to plug Far Cry VR. Okay, well, I mean, go and play Far Cry VR anyway, because what the stuff we did with the space, and that you travel across the whole island and yet you're in a little room. So like, think about how we did that. But I mean, my go-to is always Beat Saber. I'm sorry to say, it's like the most popular one, but it's so delicious in terms of like the connection between the physicality and the music and the visuals, and it just feels like it was built just for this medium. So I know it's a bit it's very popular for a good reason. So there we go.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for all coming today and having a chat. It was great. It was lovely having you here. I learnt loads, and I'm sure everybody out there learnt loads too. We're as the Intergames Careers Festival, we're here for the next 3 days. Whole bunch of different panels coming on. So definitely stay tuned to Twitch. I'd like to say thank you guys again so much. You've all been really wonderful to talk to, and thanks for taking time out of your day. Yeah, hope you all have a fantastic rest of the afternoon, and look forward to more panels later. Thank you.